This one literally just pushed out with my thumb. That's how bad it was. So what I'm doing is I'm drilling out the rubber pieces. Once I drill out the rubber piece, I use this pry bar, put it inside the middle, and just pry it back and forth around in circles. Eventually you get that. The diff bushings. Alright, if you can find yourself one of these, generally you can get them like at O'Reilly's or something. You just look for them in the socket section. Usually it comes with like a plastic sleeve on there. You can use this to take off the bushings. There you go. So you can show them that little piece before it comes off. Let me show you. That's the second one, second layer. This is the first one? Yeah. That's the first layer, second layer, and then this last layer right here.
Just gotta be careful with this last layer. Super thin. Focus. Goes. I'll fill out the last piece.
Show inside there. It's kind of okay. Well, it's a little scarred right
here.
here.
Yeah, a little bit of it, but that should be fine. It's not too deep. Just clean it up with the file and Scotch Brite if it's better compared to.
So what happens when you use this one? These kind.
The cheap chisel for wood.
Okay, so in this one, you make 2 cuts. Make sure when you put the blade closer to this edge, and just make 2 cuts. And then you get your chisel, you put it in between the 2 cuts, like right there, right on the edge, and then you start hammering, and you'll get right there. This is what you end up with when you don't use the correct tools. That's what those wood chisels will do. Just gouge everything. This is from the sawzall, but yeah. Get yourself a cold chisel. 3/8 inch cold chisel from Home Depot. Another example. You don't use the right tools, and then you just start trying to do a bunch of other stuff. You can tell the difference on each side, which side used the correct tools and which side didn't. Well, whichever way works for you, but the cold chisel worked the best for us. Literally like 15 minutes or less each bushing. These 2 took me like 4 hours just with the other chisel. Chisel and a hammer. The wood chisel. And since I sanded the insides and there is some bare metal and some of it was a little bit rusted, surface rust, I'm putting some of this on there.
The other way. Doing my toe. Alright.
Same process with these diff bushings. Heat it, lube it, hit it in. That's it. Let me show you the other side. And that's about how much stick out it shows on the paper it comes with as well. You can kind of tell. Plus, that's all the way it goes. That's all it goes anyway, so. So So it's fairly simple. You can just hold it from right here and then slide the two studs in that are on the diff. And then this just sits down on top there for right now. Then that goes underneath it to sandwich it. So this piece does have a specific way that it goes. As you can see, front. So then it goes like this. I actually just remembered that some of the oil, the gear oil, spilled out of the little breather port right there, so I'm just gonna drain it and add new oil. Alright, so everything's on. I didn't film anything because it was a very frustrating process. The diff bushings right there. From this angle, they were pushed in too far, so those bushings up there weren't lining up with the bolts, the bolt holes. So that was causing me problems, and I was whacking these in and they weren't moving at all. Finally I used a different hammer and then they went in. So yeah, everything's on. I'm ready to slide it under the car. So my setup, the main jack is right on the diff. I got two smaller jacks. You don't need to do all this if you have like a Chinese jack or something. You can go right in the middle and it'll carry everything evenly. This is just the way I have to do it. I gotta put these little rubber pads on top. It's supposed to stop excess noise from going into the cab, so I'm gonna lower it down a little bit, slide these in. As you can see, it's like tapered, so if it's not perfectly in the middle, as long as the threads are, you know, aren't getting caught on the sides of the bushing, then you should be fine, because you don't want to mess up the threads on these. But eventually it'll find its way to the center with that taper. Subframe needs to go forward a little bit. I'm gonna raise the back. So So if you go this method with like 3 different jacks, it's kind of a game of, okay, a little bit on this one, a little bit on this one, a little bit on that one, a little bit on that one, because if you do too much on one and then you come to do the other side, it'll start binding on the stud. So you have to do little by little on each jack. If you have them, now would be the time to slide in your spacers. So go ahead and do that. Alright, so I finally got it all the way up. There's a little bit of gap right there, but once I start tightening it, it should pick it up. And by the way, when you're taking all this off, there's these 2 things right here. Just an FYI, you don't have to take them off of the diff, you can just disconnect this. I took them off and it was kind of hard to take them off because it's right against the subframe. So now I have to install these. Which is the adapter ring. So this is the one for the rear. And this is the one up there in the front. Calipers are back on. Coilovers are back on both sides. Now it's just a matter of torquing down the 4 bolts that hold up the subframe, and then torquing down the differential bolts. Then afterwards you can connect the e-brake lines back, and then the drive shaft. So I'm putting the drive shaft on, 14mm bolts and nuts. Mines are bought new bolts a while back, so mines are pretty easy to put on and off. Okay, so the only problem I ran into this whole time that I'm not like worried, but it's somewhat concerning and really frustrating too, that there's really nothing on the internet, or like even the directions it came with doesn't say anything about it. But okay, so here you see that black washer on top? I had to add that, and I had to add that. Now these back bushings, these are already tight together. I mean, the diff is already tight against it, flat. And when I had this whole subframe on the ground, I tightened up the back like pretty good without having anything on here, and I had this whole thing flipped upside down. So, and when I was tightening it, before I tightened it, this bushing was sitting flat against the subframe, and when I tightened the rear, there was a gap here, and obviously there's a gap there, and this is with it upside down, so obviously I knew something was supposed to be there. And I know that the original bushings had a little washer, something like this. Let me get a good better view. And well, I didn't really remember where it went, I just know it was on this somewhere. And the thing is, on the directions for the diff mounts, it doesn't say anything about reusing them, or you don't have to use them. There's nothing that says anything about that. And I looked on the internet, I even went to the main website of SPL. There's nothing. I tried looking up other chassis, S13, S14, and there's one guy that did it with energy suspension with polyurethane, and he said on his, yeah, you have to use these, but you have to burn the rubber off. Now with those energy suspension ones, they follow that concave. These don't. And I think even if I did burn the rubber off, I think this would have started, I think it would have started squeezing. It wouldn't have sat right, basically. So, and like I said, there's no saying of it on the directions or anything, so I was stumped for a while because I didn't want to mess this up as it is. I already had trouble with not having the bushings in all the way, and then now I'm having trouble with this. So that's what I ended up doing. I ended up using crank pulley washers. I had 2 of them, and then these, I don't know where they're from. I think they're like they look like headers, the ones from the headers, something like that. But yeah, even if you tighten these 2 bolts on without that washer, it still doesn't move, obviously, because like I said, it's flat up against the bushing over here. So that was a real bummer, and like I said, it was frustrating because you don't want to, it's stuff that you don't want to mess with, you don't want to get wrong, I mean. And like I said, there's nothing in the paper, there's nothing on the website. So, but I mean, I think I got it. I think it's good enough to work. The bolts tightened up, snug. I mean, everything's tight. The drive shaft lines up fine. Everything else is fine, so. But it's still a little worrying knowing that it's like that, but we'll go on the test drive right now. Everything's finally on. Everything's good to go. Wheels are on. Definitely gotta redo my exhaust. Let's check the wheels. Alrighty. Alrighty, everything's good.